Story 1. Back when I scheduled a machine shop.
Okay, this is sort of a back in the day MC. I was swing expediter slash scheduler slash shop assistant. I didn't run the machines, I just helped get done what needed to be done on our shift. Had an old school machinist come in at start of shift and explain the blueprint was wrong, and if he followed the attached manufacturing procedure it was gonna result in a bad part. He showed me the issue and I agreed right away. Said I'd catch the engineer before shift the next day. Call engineer, he says it's right, just do it. Call him again next day, same result. Move it up a level and he storms into our office pissed off on third day. I try and show him the drawing and procedure, but he insists it's correct. He tells me I have no idea what we are doing in our shop, just follow the procedure as it's written. I had logged all of the calls etc. and asked if he would put that in writing and he does. QMC. I go to same machinist, tell him the issue. It's a 16-hour job. He sits and reads for 2 days and then hands paperwork, no part, into quality control. They check measurements and confirm it was manufactured correctly. They ask what's going on, where is the part. I come by and explain that according to both the drawing and procedure the machinist was to machine a 12-inch part down to just over 13 inches shorter than it started at. Thus the produced product, nothing. Usual ask about why did we do this, I showed them the records I had. So they wrote it up as a procedure issue. 2 days later same engineer storms in, but brought his boss, the one I initially went to when I got no response, and starts accusing me of sabotaging his part. I calmly show both of them everything, explain that we knew it was an issue and tried to fix it but we were overridden. Boss looks at engineer and says, why aren't you listening to people that are trying to help? And the engineer replies they didn't go to college to become an engineer. They don't know what they are talking about and walks out. I look at boss and he says we will get you a revised procedure and drawing. I assume you still actually have the original stock to make it from? I laughed and told him I wasn't stupid, of course I do. Engineer was no longer with the firm a couple weeks later.
Comment 1. I'm a CNC operator and boy let me tell you, when you have an old head who never went to school and has been machining for 40 years, that guy is 10 times more valuable than someone with a college degree. Protect him at all costs, lol. Comment 2. So if I read that correctly, you were to remove 13 inches from a 12-inch part. And the engineer didn't realize what was wrong after being shown? What an elitist prick. Comment 3. My brother was a machinist back in the day of hand-drafted blueprints and manually operated machine tools. He told of a similar incident, along the lines of a print that specified a hole that was larger diameter than the piece it was to be drilled in. The engineer dismissed his concerns. He went to his machine, gathered up a handful of metal chips, went back to the engineer a while later and dumped the chips on his desk. Here's your 1/2 hole, drilled through a 3/8 bushing, just like you designed it.
Comment 4. I learned early on that if a machinist is telling you something isn't gonna fly, you shut up and listen. Comment 5. My grandfather had an 8th grade education, then left to design/build boats for Higgins Boat Yard, think Day/Pacific Invasions. Trained as a tank mechanic World War II. His tank never broke as he resigned and machined several parts. Rose to be head superintendent of several oil refineries. When hiring engineers, he'd tell them, if an old-timer anybody tells you anything, listen to them, it's probably been learned through the flow of blood. He's still the smartest person I've ever known.
Comment 6. I'm an engineering manager. The number of engineers I've met I'd trust putting a bicycle together I can count on one hand without using the thumb. It's almost like the most technically illiterate are the ones that become engineers. The ones, like me, that can actually work with their hands and understand how things work are prized like gold.
Story 2. Permanent structure? Okay.
I grew up in an okay town that has since become a bit snobbier. I was driving down my old street last year and I saw my old neighbor, Andrea, sitting on her front porch, so I stopped in to say hi. Turning into the driveway, I noticed a regulation-sized soccer goal in her next-door neighbor's small front yard, which is very out of sync with the rest of the neighborhood. It made me laugh a little. After a quick catch-up, I learned a couple of things. She's the last of my old neighbors who still lives on the street, and the neighborhood has become very keeping up with the Jones with the exception of her next-door neighbor. I asked about the soccer goal, and here is the story. The neighbor has a young daughter who loves soccer. She would spend hours in the front yard kicking goals into a small goal anchored in the front yard with tent spikes. Apparently, another neighbor, they don't know who, but they suspect the people directly across the street, complained to the township because of the semi-permanent structure in the front yard. The neighbor got upset. Obviously, it was basically a toy in the front yard. Cops came to their house, they got a warning. Then they thought it would be okay as long as they took it down when they weren't home, but nope. Cops were called again and they were fined while the daughter was using it. The fine said something about having a semi-permanent, because of the tent stakes, structure. Cue malicious compliance. They weren't allowed to have a semi-permanent structure, but they could have a permanent structure. So, they went, got a permit from the township, dug the holes, filled it with concrete, and built a regulation-sized goal and hung the permit on one of the poles. Now the mystery neighbor has to look at that goal every day.
Comment 1. This is the correct response when someone has to pitch a fit.
Comment 2. Neighbor shoots for MC and petty revenge and scores. Comment 3. This is just lovely. They couldn't let a little girl have her small soccer goal, and this is their reward for their unneighborly behavior/attitude. I love it. Comment 4. That is genius. Comment 5. This is beautiful.
Comment 6. Search for Spite House. This is a spite goal.
Story 3. Okay. Really old one.
The comments in the machine shop post reminded me of something that happened a very long time ago with a college-educated engineer. When I was in the Boy Scouts, I was the troop quartermaster for a while. We needed a place to store and organize our camping gear, tents, Dutch ovens, etc. One of the guys' dads was said engineer and volunteered to supervise building some shelving for the small closet we had to store the gear in. He produced very professional blueprints, yes, for simple shelves. I was only 13 or 14 at the time, but my dad was a self-employed carpenter and took me along on jobs when not in school as his helper. So, I knew how to read blueprints and a bit about building shelves from wood. I took one look at the plans and saw a very big problem and tried to point out his mistake. Which was my mistake? To say he was highly put out by being corrected by a kid was an understatement. Lots of words like I know what I'm doing, it will work, don't worry, etc. The usual engineer self-righteous babble. So, me being me, I shut up and backed off. His plan to get the shelf into the small closest? Build it in 2 halves and put each half in and then attach them together. But, he had no support under the split, down the middle, of each shelf. We got it built, installed, and he was quite proud of himself. See, it's fine. Okay, says me, let's get all the gear stowed. First tent, canvas about 10 pounds, went up on the top shelf, in the middle, right at the split. And it went right through that shelf and all the other shelves, all the way to the floor. An entire Saturday wasted. He stood there dumbfounded and speechless. I looked at him and said, it needs supports under the shelves that aren't cut in the middle. Next week I came to the troop meeting and looked in the closet, supports installed, gear arranged. He never spoke of it again. Edit to correct grammar.
Comment 1. The worst part is that the dad completely missed the point of scouting. He had an opportunity to guide you in the design plus build process so you could learn and demonstrate a skill, then claim ownership of the result. Comment 2. Such supportive MC is unheard of.